Well, it's 7 o'clock, and September 23rd. Could I have a motion to open up our meeting?
I'll make the motion to open the meeting September 23rd, 2013 at 7 o'clock.
John Melcher, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And present are
John Melcher.
Charlie Costello.
Susan Elwell.
Frank Marchigiani.
So, this evening, in continuing our series on having a speaker to talk to us about topical health facts, we have Dr. Curtis Ursing from the Beacon Family Medicine practice in Ipswich to talk to us about ticks and Lyme's disease. Curtis?
Thank you, Charlie. Lyme disease is certainly something that's very common in our community. I would be surprised if a day doesn't go by where we don't test for it, and probably every several days that we don't diagnose it. Certainly the history is Lyme disease has been around for thousands of years, as has many illnesses of the same category, but wasn't really recognized in America until there was an outbreak of arthritis in a small town in Connecticut north of Yale,
New Haven.
New Haven, called Lyme, Connecticut. And so, of course, the investigators wondered why so many children were getting this arthritis picture, and they thought initially it was an outbreak of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And on further investigation, it took about 5 to 10 years, they were able to nail down that it was an infectious agent, and was that of the spirochete that causes Lyme disease, and was similar to a disease that had been described in Europe a century before that. But in any case, that started a lot of investigation and slow propagation of the knowledge that this new infection could be responsible for a number of rashes, joint aches, muscle aches, fevers, and headache syndromes, and we've slowly come to know a lot more about it since that period in the roughly 1970s to 1980s when most of the research begun. One of the initial things that was done was just plain epidemiology. When you discover a new illness like this, the first question is, well, how prevalent is it? And one of the classic studies that I remember reading back in medical school was they went out and surveyed every forest ranger in the state of New York. So they had this captured population of, you know, so many employees who are always out in the woods, and something like 95 to 98% of them tested positive for prior Lyme disease. In the early 1990s, when I started my practice in Ipswich, there was a researcher from Tufts who was coming up and doing a lot of work as part of developing the Lyme vaccine for being licensed at the time. And as part of their preliminary work, they did a survey where they asked every person who lived on Linebrook Road if they would volunteer to be tested, and they tested 100% positive for prior or current infection. Now, of course, very few of these people had current symptoms, so and the same was found to be true in the population of forest rangers in New York. So in the majority of the cases, their body was able to defeat this infection and rid their body of it themselves. A small number did have persistent infection and underwent at that time multiple antibiotic regimens which have now become more standardized as we've learned more about the disease.
What happened to the vaccine? I had that in the mid-nineties, and it seems to have gone away.
That's a really unfortunate story, and that basically is driven by a business decision over fear of a lawsuit. So when you have a disease that can cause muscle aches, joint aches, headaches, and you have a large number of people who always have muscle aches, joint aches, headaches, you immediately are in a situation where some people believe that no matter what evidence is presented to them, that the cause is Lyme disease. And so there was a fear by the manufacturer of the Lyme vaccine when the number of class action lawyers started advertising, if you have chronic headaches, muscle aches, etc., and you receive the Lyme disease vaccine, contact us. And it was
Oh,
some
it's a choice.
Texas law firm or something, I forget exactly which one. And at that point, the Lyme disease was recognized as primarily a limited geographic problem, so the market for the vaccine was felt to be quite small, and the judgments at that time were becoming quite large in medical device and drug malpractice cases. The classic that preceded this whole time was the Dow Corning breast implant case, where the lawyers were able to ask the same question. It was almost identical. Do you feel fatigue, headaches, muscle aches? Do you feel unwell? Have you had a breast implant? And they got enough people to respond, and they were able to get that into court before the research could be done to answer the question they were asking.
Right.
So, of course, there wasn't a defense because the research was in progress, but the judge wouldn't delay the court because these people were felt to have a right to their day in court in a timely manner. And the result of that case was basically a $10 billion company filed for bankruptcy and quit producing silicone implants. The story that's often forgotten by the lay public is it took about 5 years, and all the research came in and showed that silicone implants did not cause rheumatoid disorders. And so we threw 300 people out of well-paying jobs in Corning, New York, and bankrupted the company and paid out $10 billion and removed a very effective device from the market. So the vaccine companies saw the same game coming down the path, and they just said, you know what, we can't afford to fight this, so we'll just quit making the vaccine.
Okay.
I can remember at that time there was some discussion of trying to get the FDA to then allow for production of the vaccine under the Orphan Drug Act, which gives the manufacturer certain protections from liability and gives them some additional patent protection. But I don't know the outcome of that. It obviously didn't go anywhere because that never happened. So the vaccine, which was a first-generation vaccine, which we got in the early 1990s, was 80% effective. We tend to call a good vaccine something that's over 95% effective, but there's many vaccines that started off 80% effective, and then as the companies had a chance to develop it and refine it more, second and third generation vaccines became more effective, and it would be a great value to my patient population to have the opportunity to have that vaccine again. I hope it does come back, but I've not read of anything that indicates that's going to happen.
Sorry to derail you.
It's a great question. I mean, it's a sad
Can you still
story.
vaccinate your pets?
Yeah, and I
You hear stories of people on the Cape and Islands
I've heard
taking
that
pet
too.
vaccines,
Yeah.
which clearly
You go to
has
the
risks
vet and you
too.
say, please vaccinate me with the same stuff.
I don't know if it's the exact same vaccine,
Yeah.
but as a rule, it is in drug and veterinary, but you'd have to ask a vet if
Yeah.
it's the same vaccine that we used in humans. Yeah, so I guess if you wanted to assume the responsibility for that, you could get someone to give it to you. So in any case, Lyme disease, its presentation can be somewhat sneaky, but the majority of cases are pretty straightforward. It presents in three different ways. The first is just a rash, and that rash is distinctive. In fact, the rash is called pathognomonic, which is a term that means basically nothing else really looks like that. So if you see that rash, you can make the diagnosis with more certainty than you can by relying on blood tests. And that's when the rash is classic. There are times the rash isn't classic and it overlaps some other infections, in which case the blood tests do help. But in the initial stage, when it's just one lesion on the skin, the best diagnostic clue is just looking at it.
And what does that look like? What's the,
Initially, it's a well-defined, slowly enlarging, generally flat lesion that slowly enlarges over time. As it enlarges, the center clears first, because what you have is the bacteria, the spirochete, are migrating away from the initial entry site, which is the bite. And as they migrate away, the center no longer has the inflammation and infection, so it clears first. The outer layer clears last, and so you get the classic bullseye ring. And it sometimes itches, but not always, and it's warm to touch in most cases. And it's got a nice sharp edge. It's not real blurry or lacy.
and is it possible to not ever have a rash?
Yeah, absolutely. A significant number of people get bit and are infected and never see the rash or never have the rash. And I think it can be up to 50%, although I haven't reviewed that statistic recently. So in any case, in with that stage of Lyme disease, 2 weeks of antibiotics is 100% curative. The second stage, and this is probably the most important stage for the general public to know about and be aware of, is a stage that is basically if you feel like you have the flu, or a bad viral illness, but you don't have a cough. You know, when you think of traditional influenza, you always have a cough. If you think of traditional diarrhea-like viruses that lay people call the flu, but doctors call gastroenteritis, you always have diarrhea and vomiting. Well, with Lyme disease, you feel the exact same way as a bad viral illness, be it influenza or gastroenteritis, but you don't have a cough like you would in influenza, and you don't have diarrhea. So you have the headache, you're achy, you lose your appetite, you know, sometimes your eyes ache, you have a high fever, and that can occur with or without a rash. So if you have the flu and no cough and no diarrhea, it's Lyme disease till proven otherwise if you live on the North Shore. If you have a cough or diarrhea, then it's those other illnesses. Although it doesn't rule out Lyme disease.
When you run a fever, typically.
Yes. And that fever can be moderate to high.
Mhm.
I've seen it from, you know, average is probably 102 for that stage, but
Wow.
I've seen it 104.5, 105 in rare cases. In that stage, the spirochete, or the bacteria, has spread from the skin into the bloodstream and is reinfecting other tissues. In that stage, often you'll see multiple skin infections, because what has happened is not multiple tick bites, but by spreading through the bloodstream, just like the muscles are getting infected, the rest of the body, the joints, you're seeing the skin becoming reinfected. And so you'll have patients will present with multiple blotches all over their body. At that stage, though, the spirochete, although it might be irritating the area surrounding the brain, the meninges, it's not in the brain yet. So that would be the third stage. The third stage is often after the high fever and the muscle aches have passed, and then the patient goes into a period, and it can be years later, of just minor symptoms of low-grade headaches or joint aches. And that's certainly the phase we want to prevent people from ever getting to, because if you delay too long, there is damage being done to tissues if your body hasn't been able to clear the bacteria. And that can lead to chronic complaints even after the antibiotics.
So you can still do treatment to somebody that's in the third phase, but there'll be some residual damage?
It's 100% curable at all three stages. It takes 21 to 28 days of antibiotics for the last stage. That clears the body of the spirochete. There's never been a documented antibiotic-resistant case of spirochete disease in the United States or Europe, and yet the damage is permanent, and that's where it gets really frustrating, because people want to feel better, but unfortunately we've passed the stage where we can help them because the infection was there too long. The good news is that's a very, very small number of people. So in summary, it's a problem that is endemic, meaning it's common in our community. It is one that people get reinfected from over and over again, much like kids get reinfected with strep throat over and over again. The good news, like strep throat, it's 100% curable when diagnosed and treated. And that treatment is successful at all stages, although late stages can leave patients with permanent damage that can't be reversed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions?
Well, there are other diseases that come with that, aren't there? Babesiosis and...
Correct, yeah. Lyme disease is the most common of the
Right.
tick-borne infections, especially in New England. The other two, babesiosis,
Yeah.
which is a bacteria that tends to infect blood cells. And the third one is anaplasmosis and ehrlichiosis, which tends to primarily infect white blood cells. They also disseminate, though, in other organisms. And we often see those infections run together. So when a patient with Lyme disease doesn't get better immediately, you look for the other two. If when you do the initial blood test for Lyme disease, you see an anemia, or you see a decrease in platelets, which are the substance in the blood that helps clotting, then you immediately look for those other two illnesses, which Lyme disease tends not to affect the red blood cells or the platelets, but those other two do. So there's some clues that help you sort it out. Otherwise, they look very similar from a clinical presentation, minus the rash.
And seasonally, are there certain times of the year when you're more apt to see Lyme disease you should be looking out for it?
Lyme disease is present year-round, but of course, since the ticks cling very closely to their host during cold weather and don't latch off to hang on bushes because they would die from the cold, it's unusual to see it during the winter months below freezing, although I do get cases from hunters and people who are working in wood piles and getting close contact with material that would contain live ticks. But in the majority of cases, the peak season starts when the frost is past. So late March, when we start getting a few warm days, we start getting cases, and then it just starts ramping up. It pretty much levels off through the whole summer, and now it's starting to diminish, but we're still seeing regular cases, and will until we get some really consistently cold weather.
How long does the tick need to be attached before? It has to engorge
Yeah.
itself with
It-
blood first, right?
That's a great question. The epidemiology, or the research that has been done on that, has shown that for every 100 tick bites, if the tick is on the body for 24 hours, there's a 1% risk of it transmitting infection. So many of those ticks are infected, but since the spirochete is in their saliva, it takes a while for them to inject that, dissolve enough tissue, feed on it, inject more, and to cause enough infection that it overwhelms the immediate defense mechanism of the body. So the general rule is if you remove that tick within 24 hours, you don't need treatment, unless you then develop symptoms of a flu-like illness or a distinct rash sometime within the next 4 weeks. So it can be anywhere from shortly after the bite to 4 weeks later, where you should seek medical attention if you remove a tick and then develop a flu-like febrile illness.
If you, let's say it's one of the there's a person who doesn't realize they have it, they don't see the rash, it could be on a back or something. Will that show up in a routine, and you went for blood work for something else, would that show up, or do you need to test for the spirochete or for the
It does not show up,
Ah.
and you do need to test for it.
A specific
specifically.
blood test needs to be done for that, to diagnose it?
There are 2 tests that need to be used together. Neither one is sufficient by itself for a positive diagnosis. The first one is sufficient for a negative diagnosis,
Mhm.
but you need both to use together, and those have to be specifically requested. They're not part of any routine blood
Oh,
profile.
interesting.
That's called the Lyme title.
It's called the ELISA, and then the Western blot is called the titer. Yeah, the Western blot titer.
Do we know what town that West Nile death occurred? There was one reported in the news tonight,
I don't
in
know
Essex
that.
County,
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
60-year-old male.
I don't know that.
Now, if we're done with the tick description, I just wanted to ask you to give us a little wisdom on flu shots and the importance of paying attention to that.
Yeah, the flu vaccine has changed slightly in the last 3 years. And I think it was 3 years ago, it might be 4 now. There was a new strain of influenza that infected the United States called the H1N1 influenza strain. And the interesting thing about that strain of influenza was that it had a slightly different biology than what we normally see with influenza. Although it too peaks in the winter months, it continued to occur throughout the entire summer that first year before we had a vaccine. And subsequently, we continue to see cases of H1N1 earlier in the season than we do other types of influenza A and B. And the consequence of that is people have asked me, should I still get my flu vaccine in October, November, so it lasts through March, April, May, June? And the answer is not anymore, because the H1N1 seems to be a more virulent, it's a more dangerous form of influenza, and it occurs not only through the summer, but earlier in the flu season than we used to traditionally see. My advice to my patients have been get the vaccine as soon as it's available. If you're high risk, you could speak to your doctor about whether you should actually even get it twice late in the season, although I haven't been recommending that.
Well, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Well, next up, I guess we have 5 minutes before our 7:30 appointment. So shall we look at maybe some of our office administration things to get them out of the way?
Sure. There's 7 minutes in your packet. Or if you want to sign bills
Yeah, I
first.
think we ought to do the bills. We can do that quickly in 4 minutes.
Beach good.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
There's a set of minutes in your packet.
Yeah, we could quickly look at that. We're all set for the hazardous waste collection
Yeah.
day with the contractor.
Yeah, we're gonna be looking at it later. Yeah.
What is,
November
The
23rd.
third.
I'm going to be meeting with the director of the Water Pollution Abatement Trust to kind of give us a policy statement
Okay.
of how we want to go, how they would like us to go with the new financial arrangement.
Okay.
I'll have that this week, probably. All right, has everyone reviewed the minutes?
Mhm.
Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of August 12th?
John Melcher, I move to accept the minutes of August 12th.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Alright. Can sign that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so it's 7:30. 7:30, we have an appointment with Stanley Schlapboy of 27 Dodge Road. And is the board familiar with this matter as of yet? Frank, do you want to just give a brief overview, a real brief overview, so
Yeah.
everybody?
Sure. Let's see, I'll be brief. Back on June 4th, we got a call from Jennifer Chase, 27 Dodge Road, stating she lived in the basement. She had probably no stove, no screens, wasps around the door, ants and bugs, and wanted a housing inspection. So on June 6th, I went out there and did a housing inspection in the basement unit. June 10th, we sent a letter to the owner listing some of the issues that we found. June 14th, Jennifer gave us a call and asked about what actions were taken. We told her what was going on, and she had informed us that she had moved out of the unit. On June 20th, Mr. Sleepaway came into the office and spoke to myself and the building inspector, and said the tenant has left the home, which we did know a week earlier, and that the area that was being used is now going to be used as a basement in this home. It won't be used for living space or renting space any longer. And then on July 3rd, we got a letter from Mr. Sleepaway stating he wanted to talk to the board about some of the issues in the letter. And we did have Mr. Sleepaway on the agenda for the August 12th meeting, but he had a problem and couldn't make that evening, so we postponed it to this evening. And that's in a nutshell
All right.
where we are.
Do you want to sit up here and tell us what your
Thank you, Mr.
thoughts
Chairman.
are?
I don't happen to have with me a copy of the letter, Frank, that you had sent.
Yes. It should be in there.
Yeah.
It's at the top.
Yeah, here, you look through that. I'll give you one
Basically, Mr. Chairman, and board members, I rented a room that included a room suite, like an OPI type suite, for this room. We had met through Craigslist. We had talked to her not once, not twice. She had made representations to me and my living girlfriend, Nancy Welch, about the quality of the tenant she would be. The primary reason why she asked for the inspection is to form the basis of a lawsuit against me. That is why she has her attorney here today, and why her attorney has been active in doing this. And I'll go through each point of the inspection and ask Mr. Frank about his discussions that he's had with the building inspector. Ms. Chase did call the building inspector and asked him to also come down to find for an illegal apartment in the basement. There's 4 bedrooms that have been granted by this board under a septic system back, and I've been an owner here in town since 1987 now. Goes by quick, doesn't it? And one of those bedrooms was used in the basement area. Ms. Chase had full access to my house at all times. There was no blockage. She had another entry upstairs, but she did block access to her space to me for her request. It has been a troubled from the start, and keep in mind, this occupancy only lasted 3 months effectively. And we've come to this kind of difficulty in 3 months. From the start, we had problems with the cats and her illegally placing a cat door in the window, effectively unsecuring my property and leaving part of the door, the cat door swung in and out and caused a weather situation in the same room where the thermostat was, so the heat was constantly going. She had complained about insects, specifically wasps. This is the first time that I'm hearing about ants here tonight. That wasn't mentioned. And we effectively dealt with that each and every time, to the point where I did have to call in a professional exterminator because she threatened, again, to go to the Board of Health for something as simple as a problem with wasps hanging around her door. Instead of just contacting me in dealing with it each and every time. She threatened calling her own exterminator. And it's important to know that you got a call on June 4th and made an inspection on June 6th. And she had effectively vacated, as I will show you, by June 9th. So the purpose of this inspection, again, was to try and lay down the foundation for a lawsuit. She has, through emails, tried to extort money out of me, even prior to her leaving. And the whole basis of this, what I call a tantrum, had started when I would not allow her to have a large, loud party at the house. She had requested a Memorial Day party that was so loud that effectively she was going to rent a DJ and a porta potty so that people could show up at my house. And I said, no party, no porta potty, no music, and I'm rethinking whether this is the right place for you. That's when the problem escalated with her.
Okay, remember the scope of, come to what you're requesting us to do.
I'm asking you, under your appeal process, to rescind this letter. And I'd like to go through point by point with Frank's assistant, because there are 5 things in here that were mentioned that Frank and I discussed with the building inspector. And 4 out of the 5 are not even relevant to the letter itself. And I'd like to start, if you have the letter in front of you.
Can I ask you a question before we go through this? The inspection form has checked off violations.
Yes.
Those were legitimate violations,
Yep.
correct?
We went through the housing code and used our inspection form like we do in any other
So
inspection.
if there were violations, they were violations regardless of whatever, right?
Not necessarily, and I'd like to discuss that, because he's discussed the same thing with the building inspector. She got nowhere with the building inspector, so she went to Frank on this as well.
But
But
they
if-
were violations.
According to going through the code and when I was there that day, this is what I saw that
You saw
day.
violations and you
On that
noted
day.
violations,
Right,
and they were violations of the
housing code.
housing codes. Okay.
If you wouldn't mind, if I could, I'd like to start with the first one that's mentioned, smoke detector and carbon monoxide. The smoke detectors were working, they were secured in the property at the time that I allowed her to occupy that space. The carbon monoxide detector was a battery powered, and the battery had been removed from the carbon monoxide detector. Now, I'll go back to this because the carbon monoxide detectors were not required under my building because it had been grandfathered. This was not a separate unit, please keep in mind. This is a basement, and I would respectfully ask, because this will come up more and more if I could talk. This was specifically a bedroom and a suite in the basement. Upon them vacating, I found out that the battery had been removed from the carbon monoxide detector. And my live-in occupant will testify to that fact as well. And I asked Frank specifically whether he checked to see whether the smoke detector, the carbon monoxide detector, had a battery in there. And he said he did not even check to see that it had a battery in there, number 1. Number 2, the smoke detector was fully functioning, and it had been pulled down from the ceiling. Okay? I asked him, I don't know if I asked you or not, whether you checked to see whether the smoke detector was working. And was it working?
Yeah, I say right here, the smoke
Says-
alarm in the
says it right
basement
here.
is not secured to the ceiling but does work.
But I apologize. I don't have the letter. I don't mean to sound contentious on this, but we're going to go through this because there are things that the building inspector said that are not relevant to these CMRs. And Frank had an extensive discussion with him separately as well as in my presence. And these CMRs do not pertain to my property with a rented bedroom. And if it's necessary, we can continue this and get the building inspector back to verify that as well. The second thing,
Mr. Chairman, may I just interject one? The reason, we test the button on the carbon monoxide alarm, we don't open it up because if we break it, we don't want to be responsible for breaking the unit. So we just test the button, that's how we check it.
I fully understand, and had you checked it, if it had full access to this woman, and had you checked it, you would have found, as I did on the 9th of June, that there was no battery in the carbon monoxide detector.
That's to assume that there ever was one.
I can tell you it was, and my living will tell you there was as well.
That's hearsay.
Oh, well, let's move along with this.
Well, this
list.
might testify
Right.
to it.
Let's move along with this list, and then let's get to what you're requesting this board to consider.
Second thing, the means of egress. Again, the building inspector, after extensive discussion with Frank, said that the basement's second means of egress is a door up a flight of stairs to another renter's space. As a renter within a single-family house, and Frank could attest to this with the building inspector, because he was there at the time, it did not need a second means of egress other than what was provided to her.
Sure,
Yeah,
you're the one that's closest to
Yeah,
this.
I was told that she did not have access to the rest of the house.
You were told that. Did you check to see whether she had access to the rest of the house?
I have to go by with what she
Again,
showed me the door where
she showed you the door, but did you go up that flight of stairs to see whether that door was open all the time?
she told me her space that she was renting was just in the basement alone.
Okay, but like the carbon monoxide detector, you did not check.
Well, now, wait a second, this is a private house.
Yes,
He's been requested to go into one living unit in the house.
not a living unit, a
Well,
bedroom.
We'll call it a living unit, just for the purpose of that.
Mhm.
It doesn't say bedroom in the contract.
It says basement suite.
Suite. A suite connotes something different than a bedroom, to me. But we're not, this isn't a legal proceeding here. We have to be careful when we go into private property. We only go into the area that the complaint was about. Frank couldn't have opened up a door and trotted upstairs without your permission. It would have been beyond any authority that we have. And as he explained, we're even careful not to, if the machine doesn't work, it doesn't work. Now, if there's another reason why it doesn't work, you're open to explain that. We're in September now.
Mhm.
If you had these thoughts, you should have brought them to the attention of us earlier. I mean, it's not that that makes any difference, but it's been a long time coming to hear these things.
Mhm.
Let's continue on with the list
Sure,
in a timely way.
thank you. Kitchen facilities, it does not have a stove, it is not a legal unit. I specifically, in the contract, said that there are no cooking facilities. It is not a second unit. I was very specific about this and was not required. The fourth thing, the potable water. There is no record of water quality testing for potable water supply being done at this property. It came to light in this process, Mr. Chairman, that supposedly when I changed the septic system in 2007, that I was required to get a potable water test at that time. Neither I nor my contractor, Stuart Dalzell, was ever informed that a potable water test was required at that time. I understand the company that did the septic design has since been put out of business, or they're no longer in business. And Frank could tell you that his clerk never sent out any notification to that effect to me. Otherwise, I would have gotten the potable water test, so.
The engineer normally notifies the homeowner of this. Why that didn't happen, I don't know.
Oh, okay, it's water over the dam.
So
Is that it?
Well, there was the second,
and then the last thing on the second point about the screen.
yeah.
At that time, no, there was not a screen. It was in the process. I did not have a screen on that window. There was a screen on the storm door that was fully functioning and operating to provide ventilation into the basement suite. Per Frank's request, I did order and have since put in place a screen into that, into the window area. So, again, what I'm asking this board, and I guess and you mentioned the length of time in between. Yes, there was a length of time by the time I was notified, by the time we got to this hearing, and in between, my girlfriend got very sick and has been in and out of the hospital. That's why we're here in September instead of in June. And again, they're trying to form this as the basis of a lawsuit, even though the building inspector said there was nothing there, and it wasn't a separate unit. And I would be happy that, if this board decides that, in its wisdom, that they would like to hear directly from the building inspector and just carry this forward another month to deal with this, and hear from them, hear from him, that would be fine with me too, because that really forms the basis of most of this letter. And he will tell you that, as well as Frank will tell you the extensive discussion, that they're not relevant, these CMRs are not relevant under the single-family residence.
How did you advertise this rental property?
How did I advertise it? On
How did-
Craigslist.
They were on Craigslist?
Yeah.
And it was one room, you just said a
A
room?
basement suite, that's all. I mean, it's a bedroom with a living, like it is not an apartment. It was never an apartment, it was never advertised as an apartment. It was
Excuse me,
advertised as
I
a
just wanna
bedroom,
check for a second.
as
Mr.
a
Slip, go
bedroom
ahead.
suite,
Okay.
that's all, like an au pair suite.
Now, what is your name?
My name's Jennifer Chase. I was the tenant that actually called the inspector in. The advertisement was actually my advertisement. I sought out on Craigslist because I was frustrated with the listings at the time, what I was looking for, and he had emailed me back with what he had, and I actually have the email, if you guys would like to see it, what he was offering, and what he offered was exactly what was said in the lease, and is fairly different from what he's describing to you guys. And
Well, now,
it's not something that he advertised. He sought me out and emailed me with this offer of this, what was it called? In-law apartment was the terminology that he used.
so,
It was a use and occupancy of a basement suite. I never used the term in-law apartment.
I have the email if you'd like to see it.
so let's just finish. So you're asking us to consider rescinding this letter.
Yes, sir.
Subsequently to this tenant leaving, have you had a change in mind about the suitability of this basement suite for future tenants?
I am not renting that suite out.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Sleepoy did come in and talk to myself and the building inspector, and he told the both of us that this space, whatever you want to call it, will only be used as a basement for this home. it will not be used for any more, for living space.
I've had my kids down there through the years, you know, we've had, my adult son occupy the space in the past. For $800, this woman got heat, hot water, internet, TV, and and sometimes no good heat, hot water, electricity, internet, TV. Sometimes no good deed goes unpunished. And in this case here, an occupancy that lasted a little over 3 months has brought us to this point.
Because you filed a restraining order against me and had me removed from the unit. That's why it was
Lock
only
her up.
3 months.
30-day notice.
Well, now, we have to remember that this is a Board of Health meeting talking about this incident or this inspection that you requested Frank to see. As far as I'm concerned, the legal matters between you aren't part of what we're here for.
I understand.
And personally, after hearing the facts and looking the file over, I don't see reason to rescind this letter, but I would if Mr. Schleppoy would notify the board office in writing your intentions not to use this unit for other than kind of domestic storage in any basement. Really, the purpose of this letter, as far as we're concerned, will be mute. I mean, we don't have to rescind the letter. The purpose of the letter was for you to improve these things. The person, the reason why this was written no longer is there, and
But I'm suggesting to you that without the rescission of this, with the lawyer here present, no one would come to this hearing here with their lawyer without the further intent of trying to sue me further in the housing court based on this inspection.
let him finish.
Based on this inspection. And some of these points, as I told you in discussion with the building inspector, are not correct according to the housing code. They may be as part of the CMR, but they're also not relevant to the housing code and the housing sanitary code under a single-family residence. It's as if you rented out a bedroom within your apartment or within your house. This is what the situation was. And had I been afforded the opportunity when this whole situation came up, I would have explained this to Frank. I would have, but I was never notified in this whole process until I received the certified letter from the Board of Health through Frank. I didn't even know that there was an inspection. And you have to keep in mind that this person moved out within days of this inspection. So what was the motivation behind this inspection? Was it to correct the conditions for further occupancy, or was it to form the basis of a lawsuit?
Can I address that? Because I am the attorney.
Yeah, just speak your name for our...
My name is Attorney Jane Triano. I have an office in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and I do represent Jennifer Chase. The reason for this letter was because he was representing himself as a landlord. It wasn't a matter of just a single, somebody just renting out a room. He established the landlord-tenant relationship. He used that. He had her sign a lease.
There was no lease. There
He
was a
had
use
her
and occupancy
sign.
letter.
He had a sign of an agreement, and that forms the basis of a legal lease. He also served her a notice to quit. He had that served by a constable. Not to mention the numerous phone calls to the police department representing himself as the landlord. So while he says that maybe these don't apply as it applies to the Board of Health, and I would agree with you, that at this time, he's not a landlord. But from the period of March until June, he was. And that is the basis for forming a suit in a court. Maybe not here, but these were conditions that occurred at the time, so that the board does have the legal right to question that from the period of March to June. So I would ask that the letter not be rescinded because there was a violation.
So what are you hoping to get out of all this? I mean, we're at the Board of Health, we're
It
not
doesn't
in a
matter.
trial court.
It
doesn't matter.
I'm not here to
We don't need
discuss
to
that.
get to
I'm
Well,
here to.
let me ask
Who
you,
will? Who
let me
will?
ask you,
Okay, now let's please have it quiet.
could I ask,
Oh, my.
what will happen if this letter stays in place? Do you intend to sue me?
We haven't discussed what we're going to do, but you acted as a landlord, you violated the law.
I did not violate the law.
You did not
Okay.
and this is a matter for housing
I
court.
think you're
Like, hear
wasting
from
your
me?
money on a lawyer,
Okay.
to tell you the truth.
Okay,
Ridiculous.
And we need advice from them.
Oh, kiss my ass.
I put forth one idea.
Okay.
There's another thought that
Nice.
if Frank needs it, to connect with the building inspector, or are you firm with his
Well,
feeling? Have you met with him and?
Yeah, I've talked to the bill inspector. His interpretation, because there's no stove in a unit, is not considered an apartment. There was some overlap in the two codes and some cross jurisdiction factors here. We go in and we look at what we're required to look at, and we note what's there at the time.
There you
Now that there is not a tenant there, or anyone living there, to call her a tenant, whatever. And Mr. Sleepaway said that the space will no longer be used for livable space.
But if I could, Mr. Chairman, it's based on the date of the inspection. There was an occupancy at that time. And by their lawyer saying that they haven't made a decision whether or not to sue me or not, leaves open the possibility that they will. And their possibility, the small thing that they're hanging their hat on, and the building inspector would testify, and because I would subpoena him, that this was not a separate apartment unit.
You know what?
And that we're leaving that possibility open, you're leaving the door open to that.
Well, it appeared to, I say again, I don't think the letter should be rescinded. The purpose of the letter was to cite infractions that
Mhm.
Frank felt at the time were evident. And if you go to court or have to present in some other arena, you can question the wisdom or the correctness of this letter. But it does exist, and it was served, and it was put into circulation. And Frank wrote it, the office wrote it in good faith,
Mhm.
and there are some things that are certainly accurate. Maybe you debate some of the other things, but for the purpose of us defending residents of public health rights, we acted in a very timely way. We investigated, and this is the document that we produced. And unfortunately, you have another agenda that doesn't come to this table.
I fully understand that, but for all the other residents of town who may rent out a room in their house, and I know, I have been one of those, you're opening up a can of worms to those people. Many of those people are vulnerable, many of those people are elderly, who have a need to be able to rent out a room in their house to pay their bills. And had I had the means, I would have preferred not to. But at that time, I needed to have some use of that space, okay? This was not an apartment. I made it very, very clear. The building inspector, if you don't take my word, would go through the different points as we did at the next meeting. If you wanted to table this for the moment, I would respectfully ask that you get him here in person to go through these, because there are things on there where Frank said they may overlap, but the building inspector is saying that they do not apply in this case. The law does not apply to these different things. And I would respectfully ask that if there is any doubt in that matter, that you hear it directly from the building inspector.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yep.
When someone opens their home up, they become subject to the housing court laws of tenants. There are laws that protect tenants. So, to Mr. Sleepoy's argument that other people in town are doing it, they run the same risk that he did when he opened up this unit, apartment, whatever you want to call it, and he violated your Board of Health regulations. These do apply to him. He wants to wipe it under the rug. And whether there's a lawsuit or not, he's held himself out to be a landlord. He accepted rent for a space in his home. And so you have to follow your regulations when there's a violation.
These are state regulations.
Right.
Well, I think we should instruct Frank to set up an appointment with the building inspector. I mean, this is an emotion, I'm just thinking out loud here, to clarify this list. Just for our benefit to have his input. You've spoken to him, but we don't have it before us. We don't have a document from him before us. So if you were to check in with him, and we probably should, is this a hearing? No, this is what, just
Well,
an
it's a
appointment.
formal appeal of the Board of, the health agent's letter. This is a formal appeal of that letter.
Is that written somewhere? Is that what was a
Request.
request?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, then why don't we continue this until our next meeting? And you get the input from the building
So
inspector.
just so I'm clear, a letter from the building inspector.
Addressing these from his point of view, remembering that he didn't write the letter, it comes from our office. Are you in agreement with that?
That's fine.
So
I don't know
what-
how we would disagree about ants and no screen and all that.
Right.
Well, ants weren't even mentioned in that.
Or whatever it was,
So, let's have someone make a motion.
just to cover the
for
bases,
what
I will
we
do
just
that.
said. Okay? we can-
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Jill needs to talk.
I move to involve the building inspector in review of this letter of order for corrections and get input from him for our next meeting.
I'll second
All those in favor?
Aye.
that. Done.
Okay.
And have we set a date yet for that?
No,
No,
we'll
we
do
have-
that later, but you can get that from the Board of Health office. We have to hear about what more business we have to do
Thank
now
you.
in the next month.
And I apologize for taking so much time. I appreciate it.
Okay? Now, let's see, what's next? Let's move over here to the mosquito control update.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Mosquito control update,
Thank you.
okay?
Chase, let me get my paper together here. Well, as you know, West Nile virus still continues to circulate throughout the state. As a matter of fact, in this area, there's about 3 towns that there's only about 3 towns that haven't discovered a positive mosquito for West Nile virus. So it's throughout this entire shore Essex County area. We're continuing to monitor things week to week, taking any recommendations from mosquito control. Continuously moving surveillance traps around to see where the virus is going, what species of mosquitoes are out there that carry these viruses. They see the numbers are escalating, they let us know. Haven't heard anything at this time.
The barrier spraying the fields?
Yes, they are. In fact, they did just one the first week in September, and we're watching that to see how things progress.
Which fields are they hitting?
All the ball fields, the school, the soccer fields
Yep.
next to the school, and the Arias Park, and Haley Field, I believe is
Mhm.
the name of it. Yep. And common areas like the cemetery, things like that.
Those people really get it.
Yeah. Well, it's more for funerals and things. Yeah.
To raise havoc out there.
All right, shall we move on to
Yep. So that's pretty much that. We'll keep
Household
it-
Hazardous Waste
Yeah.
Day?
Yeah.
Very
And the
nice.
date again for that is?
It's November 23rd.
Okay.
You'll see in your packet, Mr. Chairman, that there's a letter that I put together to inform DEP about our event, and also a notification to Clean Harbors that we sent a notification to DEP about our event. And I have 2 copies of the agreement for you to sign, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
One will go back to Clean Harbors and one will be for the office. That's on the last page.
do we have a contract limit?
Normally we put a dollar amount in there the day of the event to flag us.
Okay.
We very rarely,
Did it-
well, we hit it occasionally, but it's usually right around that ballpark. If you'd like to set a dollar amount. you
No,
can-
everything has worked well the way we've done it in the past. Will you be here for that Saturday?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, you can certainly set a dollar amount,
Yeah.
but
Have we been spending less each year as we do it?
the first year we did this, oh God, what year was it? 2004, 2005, I think.
Yeah.
We had a large number of
Massive.
people.
It should
But-
be diminishing.
Yes, but since we've been doing annually, it's been about the same every year, give or take. So it's leveled off to a manageable,
With 125, 130
Yeah.
cars come through, so
right.
summer.
And we also
full.
collect other items that are non-chemical. So some people just come in with a TV set or
Sure,
a tire or 2. So
and you're allowing other towns to come in too.
we can if they let us know.
Okay.
If we charge the appropriate fees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
'Cause that's a little different than the one in May,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, this is more chemicals,
Right.
pesticides.
So that has to be disposed of, so we can't pay for all the towns.
Right, exactly. I guess it's very costly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, what's next?
Okay. Can we take this?
Next up is, the flu vaccine.
Yeah.
Everybody had the shots?
Yeah.
Yeah, we,
Curtis said get it quick.
we did,
Oh.
we will be getting 200 doses from the Department of Public Health this year. It's down 10 from last year. They will be coming in multiple shipments. So once we do get all of our allotments in, we'll be working with the health nurse to set up clinics, hopefully in October to start. And we'll keep going until the vaccine is finished.
Do we give it out to the physician's offices too, or in
They
town, or-
get them directly now. We
They-
used to.
We used to.
We used to years ago.
Oh,
We used to
but we
actually
don't do
supply
that
all the
anymore.
vaccine for them,
Right.
order it, pick it up.
Yeah.
Now they get
Oh,
it
yeah,
directly
yeah.
from the state.
Yeah.
So,
And Susan doesn't get them.
No.
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, shall we, just a quick follow-up on the septic loan
Yep,
finances?
sure. As you remember, last meeting, we were talking about the last 200,000 that we were waiting to draw down. This was from the original $750,000 that we borrowed a few years ago. We drew down the $550,000, and we did draw down that last $200,000 before the end of the year. But there was some question now that we had that letter from DEP that you had talked about last week about charging 2%. So we did work with the treasurer's office and, stating because we did borrow that money years ago and that we did draw it down before June 30th, that we should be getting that at 0%. And we did get confirmation of that
Yeah, we're gonna get that
about a week ago.
at zero interest.
As a matter of fact, I believe the treasurer is signing the note with the selectmen this evening.
Okay.
So that has been done. We should be seeing the money very soon. And that just resolved that uncertainty there. So that
Okay.
should be coming in,
Good.
and we'll have.
And the next thing is the fall special town meeting, but we really don't have to discuss
No.
it because we're not having any
Right. It's just
article.
to make you aware that, that we are going to be having one. And
What's the date of that?
it's on November 4th, Monday, November 4th. We did briefly talk about potentially borrowing more money from the state, but for the loan program, but I think talked to the treasurer and accounting, and we all feel that we're okay for right now. We'll look at it again in the spring.
All right.
But
What
it-
about 7 or 8 people to have septic replaced? Is that what would work out to?
An additional borrowing, or?
No, for what's there.
Oh,
Fair
we
enough
have,
For how many projects?
I'd say even more than that. We did have about 2 or 3 people that sold their homes that did pay us back.
Mhm.
So we do have that additional money as well to.
Oh, good.
So that was another factor that we
Yeah.
had talked about, of not seeing the reason right now to
Okay.
look at this in the fall.
So I'm meeting with the director of this program this week or early next week. Could you get me the balance of what we have,
Sure. Mhm.
kind of a status sheet
Available to lend out.
available to lend out and also available in the other account, the operational account? So it's both sides.
Administrative?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So the amount of money to lend out and the amount of administrative.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I guess next up is our next meeting, which, let's see, we're into,
That was the 21st.
21st of October.
Are you fishing somewhere?
I think I might be bird hunting, but,
Drop for ticks, Joey.
no, in New Brunswick.
Careful about the ticks. So
There's
is it-
no ticks in New Brunswick.
Isn't it allowed up there,
Eh?
huh? No ticks.
Well, shall we, 27th? Well, we could, let's say the 21st, and I'll plan around
And
it.
if it doesn't work, we can do the 28th.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could always.
and I'll know soon.
Okay.
So let's say the 21st. Yep.
And we'll talk.
We'll talk,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. No, I mean, if that date doesn't work.
Yeah.
Then we can.
Okay, now concerns of the board. Anything pressing?
Nothing I'd like to discuss right now.
Anything in the office that's needs a little discussion?
Not that I'm aware of. no.
Everything running smoothly?
For the most part, yeah.
All right, well, shall we
Your turn.
make a motion?
I move that we adjourn at 8:15 on September 23rd, 2013.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.